tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
Come on, girl.
We're all familiar with the incredible bond that exists between a dog and its master. But the world of medicine is beginning to recognize that that mysterious connection can sometimes defy ordinary explanations. Does man's best friend have the ability to detect life-threatening illnesses? When a vivacious college freshman without an enemy in the world is brutally slain, her mother personally takes on the case to find her daughter's killer. Could the mother's undercover work with the local police department have made her 18-year-old daughter a target for murder? 17 human bones are found strewn in a Kentucky stream. Whose are they, and how did they get there? For forensic anthropologist Dr. Emily Craig, solving mysteries like this has made her one of the most renowned experts in her field. When Deputy Clark Jackson decided to investigate a steamer trunk he found by the roadside, he was taken by surprise. He had no idea that the contents would lead detectives on a 5-year search for a killer. Join me for these intriguing stories and more. You may be able to help solve a mystery. Before dawn, one crisp September morning, 18-year-old Bonnie Craig began her trek to school. 2 days a week, the University of Alaska freshmen walked 45 minutes through the early morning darkness to catch the bus to campus. Bonnie was a diligent student who prided herself on arriving promptly for her 7 a.m. class. But on this day, Bonnie would never make it to school. Later that afternoon, another Anchorage College student was out shooting photographs from a hiking trail in a public park when she made a grisly discovery, the lifeless body of a young woman floating in McHugh Creek.
Her remains were located at the bottom of a 33-foot cliff in fairly shallow water. It wasn't a place that you would normally hike along the stream to get to where she was. So she could have been hiking and taken a misstep somewhere and slipped and fallen off of the cliff.
The following day, the victim was identified as Bonnie Craig. The medical examiner determined she had drowned, but Bonnie had also suffered severe head injuries, possibly resulting from a fall off a cliff. At the time of Bonnie's death, her mother, Karen Campbell, was on vacation in Florida. She rushed home when she learned the tragic news.
They told me Bonnie had died in a hiking accident, and I wouldn't believe it. I still expected Bonnie to be coming up to me and apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry, Mom, it wasn't me."
Viewing her daughter's body was devastating for Karen. However, as she took a closer look, Karen was stunned.
This is no hiking accident.
Her knuckles were bruised and broken. There was defensive wounds on her body, and I knew that she had been attacked. It was murder.
Troubling questions had already begun to surface before Karen Campbell had viewed her daughter's body. What was Bonnie doing anywhere near McHugh Creek Park on a school day? And since she didn't drive, how did Bonnie get there? A distance of 10 miles from where she was last seen. Even then, authorities were slow to conclude that Bonnie had been murdered. And what few leads investigators developed, they kept to themselves. But a frustrated Karen found an ally in television reporter Maria Downey.
So, you can tell me anything about cause of death, anything like that?
Not at this time.
It was really tough for the community to take because Bonnie was a well-liked, well-known young lady.
Could I get an official statement?
We talked with Karen several days after Bonnie's body was found, and at that time, troopers still were not releasing much information.
One piece of information troopers didn't release was the result of a sexual assault examination, which Karen learned of 6 months later.
I had originally asked if she had been raped, and they told me no. After fighting to get information from them, they revealed to me that yes, Bonnie was brutally raped and murdered.
The results of the autopsy show that there was evidence of sexual activity. We can't confirm whether it was a sexual assault or whether it was consensual sex.
Hey, can I give you this flyer? My daughter was recently killed over here.
Such disputes were typical of Karen Campbell's relationship with police. Her frustrations with investigators soon motivated her to begin her own search for information about Bonnie's death.
Everybody here in town put up signs, flyers, bumper stickers. We wanted to make sure that until the crime was solved, nobody was going to forget about it.
Karen Campbell was no stranger to investigations or criminals. On several occasions, she had performed risky undercover work as a reserve officer with the Anchorage Police Department. Wearing a hood and mask to conceal her identity, Karen would nod silently to point out those who had sold her drugs.
I was involved in what I thought was minor drug buys. I had gone out 5 or 6 times and bought crack for the Anchorage Police Department.
Karen, you got a sec?
Sure.
A few months into her investigation into Bonnie's death, Karen learned that undercover work might have jeopardized the lives of those closest to her. She was approached by an acquaintance who claimed to have information about Bonnie's murder. At his request, Karen promised to protect his identity.
They're these guys.
According to Karen, the man told her that her family had apparently been targeted on the orders of a local drug lord after a sting she was involved in resulted in the arrest of several members of his organization.
He told me that her murder was ordered by this drug lord because it was a message to the Anchorage Police Department to back off.
Let's go in here.
Bonnie was murdered the day after. The people that I identified as drug dealers were released from jail.
Despite the precautions taken to protect her identity during the bus, it would not have been difficult for the accused to learn who had fingered them.
Criminals always are supposed to know who their accusers are. And so my name appears about 10 times in each page of the indictment.
Right.
Thanks for seeing me, Detective.
Thanks. Have a seat.
Thank you.
When Karen relayed what the informant had told her to the lead investigator on Bonnie's murder, she was not satisfied with his response.
Let's just say it's a call. He said this was a retribution killing for the undercover work I did with the Anchorage Police Department.
Wait, who's his source?
When I gave him all the details, he just kept asking me, where are you getting this information? I said it was from somebody who did not want to be identified.
This is not their M.O. You know, we're investigating this.
Are you going to help me here?
Who's your source?
I'm not going to reveal my source to you. I want these leads followed.
When I told him I wouldn't reveal my source, he told me, well, then you're hindering your daughter's investigation, and I'm not going to investigate this lead. And to this day, I don't know what they've done, and probably will never know what they've done as far as investigating that lead.
The fact that she feels that we may not have investigated thoroughly enough or followed up on her confidential informant's lead, I don't believe to be true. We followed up all the leads, and if she believes that we haven't, it might just be that we haven't filled her in on every single thing that we've done.
Almost a full year after Bonnie's murder, the case took an unexpected turn when Karen was contacted by one of Bonnie's college instructors.
Hello? Yes?
She really felt that there was this one particular student that may have been involved in the murder.
What kid?
According to Karen, the instructor told her that her suspicions stemmed from reading the student's class journal and the references he made to the date of Bonnie's murder, September 28th. Karen believes certain entries in the journal could be significant.
His journal was incredibly violent, filled with anger, and there was 2 incidents where he specifically said that September 28th was going to be a very tough day, that he was going to be put to a test.
The instructor told Karen that on the day Bonnie was murdered, the student in question was absent.
He missed class this morning.
I'm sorry, I just overslept.
There was supposed to be papers handed in that day, and that student brought it to the teacher later on in the afternoon.
You overslept the whole class.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He was wet, like he had just gotten out of a shower, and she said it smelled like he had just poured a whole bottle of cologne on himself. After the murder, his journal became more peaceful. There wasn't the anger. Yet he knew that there was a student that had just died, and there was no references to Bonnie's murder.
Detectives investigated the student, but soon ruled him out as a suspect.
DNA evidence recovered from Bonnie at the scene did not match DNA evidence collected from the student at the college.
I immediately told them that didn't seem right to rule him out because of DNA, because there could have been more than one person. If there was 2 people, it didn't have to be his DNA.
Karen did some sleuthing of her own and uncovered more disturbing information.
That particular student did have an assault charge against him, and he had been bailed out of jail by a young man who had been involved in another murder.
I found it very surprising when I saw the bail slip who bailed this student, this potential suspect, out of jail.
But I'm a team player.
The student and several other of his friends were involved in a fatal shooting here several years ago.
And reading.
It doesn't sound like the type of group that a student who was up and up would have been involved with.
I do believe that he could have been the murderer, and I'll probably never rule him out.
Despite their disagreements, both Karen and investigators do agree on one thing. The key to this mystery might rest with Bonnie's routine.
A young lady who was a neighbor of hers, who was a paper delivery type person, saw her around 5:20 walking down her street. Another gentleman who had seen Bonnie a couple of days prior in the area of the bus stop saw her again that morning, and that was about the last time that we have a confirmation of anybody definitively seeing Bonnie alive. Was around 6:20 that morning.
Could someone have been lying in wait for Bonnie Craig? One neighbor reported seeing an unknown car idling in front of Bonnie's home early that morning. And an anonymous caller to the police Crime Stoppers line claimed to have seen Bonnie that morning at the bus stop talking to 2 men in a vehicle. Karen Campbell intends to do everything she can to keep the investigation alive.
Until the crime is solved, it just keeps going through your head that somebody else's child will end up murdered and raped also. So until this crime is solved, you can't give up.
No right to take that money out of our account.
A bitter argument erupts on the streets of Covington, Kentucky. Diane Washer and her husband Jimmy are at it again. A night of drinking has inflamed their already turbulent relationship.
Your name and my name. And that
Diane Washer and Jimmy Washer that evening were fighting over money and fighting over the fact that she had just received a $10,000 SSI settlement due to her bad back. As he approached her and they got into an argument, she struck him with the phone, on the pay phone, called 911, and by the time the Covington police got there, Jimmy Washer had already left.
Call?
Yeah,
They'd offered Diane Warsher a ride. She refused, walked on down the street, and in essence, they were the last ones to see her alive.
Diane inexplicably disappears. The police immediately turn a suspicious eye on her husband, Jimmy.
Jimmy Warsher was my #1 suspect, primarily because he hadn't reported her missing.
And now straightforward, feet on the floor in front of you.
And I had asked Mr. Warsher if he would consent to taking a polygraph in reference to his wife.
Yes.
Did you cause the death of Diane Warsher?
No.
The test was ruled inconclusive. So some of what he was answering was truthful, some wasn't. There wasn't enough credibility to his answers to totally erase Mr. Warsher as a suspect.
The investigation into Diane's disappearance reaches a dead end. Her case is relegated among the many unsolved missing person cases on file in Kentucky's police departments. 3 years pass. Outside of Covington, sheriff's deputies searching for an illegal marijuana field make a grisly discovery.
Looks like a skull.
A partially crushed human skull and 7 other bone fragments are strewn throughout the creek bed. Whose bones are they, and how did they get there? For the answers, the Covington police look to Dr. Emily Craig. She is one of the foremost experts in forensic anthropology, the science of identifying even the most badly decomposed human remains.
Here it looks like blunt force trauma, but I'm not going to say till we get back to the lab.
I'll go ahead and take a picture of this.
Good.
When the dead hold the key to a perplexing crime, Dr. Craig is often called upon to unravel the evidence.
I was able to determine that the bones hadn't been there that long. The end of the long bone still had some remnants of soft tissue, and the bones had kind of a greasy feel, which indicates the post-mortem interval really hasn't been that many years. And my initial estimate of the time since death was between 12 and 36 months. There's another one. Oh, look, there's bones all over the place. Once I got a good grasp of the crime scene and could see what a complex problem we had, we decided to set up an additional search and recruit anthropology students from the area. Let's get some more over here on this side, too. We did a line search of the area. We started on where the bones had been found and basically worked upstream.
Yeah, it's a jaw fragment, but it's non-human.
Come on, folks.
Good eye, though.
Complicating Dr. Craig's effort was that the search area was where the county dumped its roadkill. The stream was littered with the bones of dozens of animals. Still, the search team was able to distinguish a total of 17 human bones among them.
Got it? Got it. Once we got all the evidence back to the lab, then we were able to get a better biological profile of the victim. The sex, she was female. The race, she was white. I was able to get a good estimate of her height, just a little over 5 feet tall. And I also was able to determine from the bones of the skull that she had sustained massive head trauma at the time of death. There was one particular bone that was intriguing, and that was a bone from her lower back. This particular bone showed a lot more arthritis, some bony lipping and changes that were just not consistent with the rest of the skeleton. So I was able to offer an opinion that this individual suffered from back pain.
From their missing persons files, police found a match for the profile Dr. Craig had assembled. It was Diane Warsher, the Covington woman who disappeared 3 years earlier. Her medical records indicated that shortly before she vanished, she injured her back in a traffic collision.
When they called me and said they found the remains of my mom, I totally went into shock. I kind of knew she was dead by that point. But like I said, I carried on hope. It did give me some sort of relief to know that my mother was dead, and being able to bury her was great. It did help a lot.
Dr. Craig's findings sparked new public awareness of Diane's case. As police hoped, an informant stepped forward. But to their surprise, he did not finger their prime suspect, Diane's husband, Jimmy. Instead, he said a local house painter, Larry Freeman, was responsible for Diane's death.
This is Diane Warsham right here.
When police brought in Larry Freeman for questioning, he confessed. He said he and Diane had gotten drunk together, then went joyriding. While driving, he lost control of his car, and Diane was ejected from the passenger's door.
When the vehicle finally came to a stop, he ran back to her, saw that her hair was blood-soaked, and realized he had probably killed her. It was at that point that he took her down to an area where he was raised, where he felt comfortable, and threw her into the creek.
Larry Freeman was convicted of manslaughter and is now serving a 20-year sentence. The mystery is one of hundreds Dr. Craig has helped solve. But despite her expertise, other cases remain too difficult to crack. Perhaps you can help Dr. Craig piece together one of the most perplexing of her career.
What's this?
It began when two teenagers were returning from exploring caves in Barren County, Kentucky.
What kind of bones? Oh, that's a human bone.
In the debris of a roadside dump, they discovered fragments of a human skeleton. The county coroner called Dr. Craig to the scene.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
At this scene, basically all we had when we first started was a pair of red jeans with the human leg bones still inside.
Okay, here's a fibula.
Okay.
I see another arm bone and shin bone.
Dr. Craig, I think I found the skull.
Ultimately, we were able to recover almost the entire skeleton. The skull is the best indicator of race and sex. You look at the brow ridge, you look at the nose, you look at the chin, the cheeks, just the general shape.
Dr. Craig's analysis of the skull would later determine that the victim was a white female in her early 40s. And cut marks on one of the bones indicated she may have been stabbed to death.
Okay, well, let's start collecting this. Got a bag for me?
Sure.
The left tennis shoe, or a sneaker, whatever you want to call it. And that red stuff, you know, it looks like denim. Red jeans.
Dr. Craig hoped that the victim's clothes would yield additional clues. She hoped they might match the clothes indicated in one of the local police's missing persons files.
When I got these remains back to the lab, I was able to do a very detailed study, and within a very short time, I found a file that almost exactly matched. Age, race, sex, height, time since death were indicative, but absolutely positive were the fact that this victim was wearing red jeans, white tennis shoes, and a button-down blouse.
The file was that of 42-year-old Nancy Dadisman. Before she disappeared, she had lost custody of her 5 children in a bitter divorce. Heartbroken, she had come to Kentucky seeking a fresh start. Nancy had vanished on a September night 2 years earlier, after her car had broken down in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
She was planning on traveling I-65 north to meet a male friend of hers in the Indianapolis, Indiana area. We did a lot of background check on this individual. We was able to verify that it was not possible that he would be a suspect as far as this case is concerned.
The hillside where Nancy's remains were found was 30 miles from where she was last seen. The Barren County authorities have no suspects, but believe only someone familiar with this area of Kentucky would choose to place her body there.
Identifying the victim is the first step in solving the crime. We've done this first step. Now we have to find out who did it.
Dogs have been domesticated for thousands of years, and man continues to rely on our canine companion's sense of smell. Whether finding someone who's lost, tracking a fugitive, or sniffing out explosives, the strength and accuracy of a dog's nose is legendary.
If you were to take a gigantic football stadium that NFL teams play in and fill the entire stadium with yellow tennis balls and had one white tennis ball, they can smell the one white tennis ball in an entire stadium.
Using this powerful sense of smell, is it possible a dog could actually diagnose life-threatening illnesses? Could these family pets possess hidden medical talents? You're about to meet two incredible dogs whose owners offer persuasive evidence that man's best friend may be able to save lives in mysterious ways.
Okay, got your latte working right now.
Nancy Best seemed to have it all. In addition to being the mother of 3 children, Nancy ran a thriving coffee business in Garberville, California. In fact, business was going so well, she had recently opened a new shop.
Blueberry muffin and coffee.
Despite Nancy's hectic lifestyle, her beloved dog Mia was never far from her side. She'd acquired the yellow lab as a puppy.
Good. Stay.
A friend of mine saw the dogs and called me, and Mia was the first dog that ran up to me. At the time, I didn't know if I wanted a boy or a girl until she came up to me, and I fell in love with her instantly.
Yes, and you were such a good dog.
Nancy's mornings were spent running the coffee house.
You helped Mommy. Oh, thank you. No, Mommy's tired.
But about 1 o'clock each afternoon, Nancy set aside an hour just for herself and Mia.
I would drive home and lay on the couch and take a nap before I'd have to pick up my daughter from school so I can recharge my batteries for the rest of the day.
Then one afternoon, out of the blue, Mia began acting strangely.
She came up and started sniffing and licking at my breast. And because she was 8 months pregnant, I thought maybe she was kind of wigging out or maybe smelled food from the Java joint.
Girl, what do you want?
So I didn't pay any attention to it. I just went and told her to lay down.
But Mia was persistent. The following evening, as Nancy was struggling to fall asleep, Mia began tugging at the bed covers.
She started biting my shirt away like a dog bites fleas, little tiny nibbles, and was trying to pull my shirt away from my body.
Enough. Enough.
I was starting to get upset with her.
Out.
Desperate for her much-needed sleep, Nancy banished Mia to the backyard. The following day, during Nancy's afternoon break, Mia repeated the same behavior. But this time, Nancy finally received Mia's apparent message.
Mia jumped up on my lap while I was sitting up and dove with her nose into my chest. And the force of the pressure of her nose made me rub it because it hurt. And when I rubbed it is when I felt the lump.
Nancy was stunned to discover a lump in one of her breasts.
I had had a negative breast exam by a physician just 4 months prior. There was no cancer in my family. I was 39, not old enough for a routine mammogram. So I was thinking this couldn't be cancer, but the lump felt very odd. It was quite large.
Medical tests showed Nancy had what appeared to be a cancerous tumor in her breast. A subsequent lumpectomy confirmed her worst fears. Nancy had been stricken with a stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma, an aggressive form of breast cancer. In the midst of her health concerns, Nancy couldn't help thinking about Mia's unusual recent behavior.
I had remembered the days prior where she was sniffing and licking at the spot. It was like she was anxious to come in and say, you know, would you listen to me?
When I first heard about Nancy Best's case, I talked to an oncologist at the Mayo Clinic about that. And one of the things that we surmised there was that there was a certain smell that was being secreted. The type of tumor that she had in her breast may have had a certain kind of an odor. But you have to remember, this kind of breed of dog is actually used for hunting. You know, they have a very sensitive nose.
Come on, girl.
Nancy underwent a partial mastectomy. Months of chemotherapy and radiation therapy followed. She has been cancer-free since 2000.
The doctor believes that had this cancer not been detected at this time, within 6 months it could have entered my lymph nodes and I would have died.
Bring it here.
Needless to say, the experience has forged an even stronger bond between Nancy and her remarkable dog, Mia.
Ready?
I'm not the kind of person that believes in flying saucers, but I do believe that miracles happen and things happen for a reason, and there was a reason that I got Mia. There was a reason she became part of my life, and I believe that because of her, I'm alive today, and I love her.
That's my sweet girl.
If it's possible for a dog to sniff out an early cancer diagnosis, are there other unexplainable and even more profound life-saving powers a pet can offer its master? Darlene Wermeyer of Spokane, Washington believes her dog Shadow is the most vital prescription she's ever received.
He was the best medicine that I could have ever taken. If it was in a pill form, he'd be a miracle drug.
In 1991, Darlene was diagnosed with diabetes, which triggered a series of medical setbacks.
Coming through, folks.
While recovering from subsequent open-heart surgery, Darlene suffered a stroke. For a time, she lost her ability to speak. By 2001, she had recovered her speech, but struggled with an awkward stutter. While attending a family reunion, the anxiety of being in a crowd made that stutter even worse.
I was so nervous, I couldn't talk again. And this little schnauzer named Maggie came up to me and started licking my hand. I started petting her. She got in my lap.
Oh.
And I noticed as long as I sat and started petting her, I could talk so much easier. It was phenomenal.
So phenomenal that as soon as she returned home, Darlene scheduled an appointment with her neurologist.
He's like, yeah, I know about dogs. I know how they can help. There's been lots of studies done. So he wrote a written prescription for a dog.
So on doctor's orders, Darlene adopted a Schnauzer of her own, and Shadow became a member of her family.
Come on. Come on, boy. Come on, Shadow.
The bond between Darlene and Shadow quickly grew, and while petting Shadow, Darlene's speech significantly improved to the amazement of her doctor.
We don't fully understand why dogs have such an effect on people, but in Darlene's case, she felt very calmed by the dog. Perhaps, you know, paying attention to the animal, petting, and the sensory effects of that could be actually just putting her more into a meditative trance.
A short time after adopting Shadow, Darlene learned what an extraordinary animal he was. As Christmas neared, Darlene spent hours baking holiday cookies.
Shadow want a cookie. Oh, look what I got for Shadow.
When a wave of exhaustion hit her, she knew she needed to get off her feet. Darlene quickly dozed off. But Shadow was alarmed by something and would not allow Darlene to sleep.
He starts pawing at me. He wouldn't leave me alone. I sat up in the room, just spun.
Uncertain why Shadow was upset, Darlene checked the glucose level of her blood. It was dangerously low. If a diabetic's blood sugar level falls too low, it can trigger unconsciousness or even a coma. Darlene's ever-present canine companion had somehow diagnosed her medical dilemma before Darlene was even aware of it, and he continues to provide her with medical alerts to this day.
Shadow has helped Darlene in many different ways, not only in her safety, as far as being able to detect the low blood sugar, but also just in her general life. Darlene now is able to walk without a cane. She's able to function and do the things that she wants to do on a daily basis.
The lives of Darlene Wermeyer and Nancy Best were saved by the mysterious powers of their dogs.
You helped Mommy. Oh,
The ability of these dogs to detect a seizure or detect cancer, it's probably equal parts their incredible sense of smell,
their incredible ability to read body language, and then kind of what I call not just a sixth sense, but a sixth sense. And that's that ability to know when something's just not quite right, and then the ability to draw near to help them. We shouldn't be so amazed that pets are able to do this. We should be amazed on the amount that we don't know that they're able to do.
An off-duty park ranger was heading out of Harper's Ferry Historic Park in Virginia at about 11 p.m. when something caught her eye. Near the trash bin was a large steamer trunk. Alone and without a radio, she decided to postpone investigating until she returned to work the next morning. It would be hours later, when Deputy Clark Jackson was making his rounds through the national park, that the contents of the trunk would be revealed.
I saw the black trunk just sitting right there, right past the barricade. And that's when I got out, went underneath the barricade. I nudged it with my foot and noticed it was very heavy. I lifted the top of the trunk off, and there was a duffel bag in it. So I unzipped the duffel bag, and there was another duffel bag in it, and it was a fleeting moment in the back of my mind where I said, boy, it'd be strange if there was a body in this bag. And I unzipped the second duffel bag, and there was a body in the second duffel bag. I couldn't believe I found a body.
Hey, this is Deputy Jackson. I'm out at the Potomac Wayside Overlook.
Officer Jackson immediately called for backup.
I turned my alley lights on and takedown lights on just to give me a little more light. I didn't know if someone was watching me in the woods. It made me feel a little bit more comfortable having some security with those lights.
Over the next several hours, authorities conducted a complete search of the area. Crime scene specialists photographed the site, including the body of an elderly man inside the trunk. Detectives were called in to investigate. The quest to identify the body began.
Now, you were the first on the scene to discover the trunk? Yes, sir.
The trunk, with its human remains, was wrapped and taken to the coroner's office.
Male Caucasian, late 60s, early 70s, found at the Potomac Wayside Overlook.
When he was taken to the morgue and removed, the position he was in was his knees were up against his chest, and he was folded into the duffel bag, placed into this trunk, which is only 31 inches long and 15 and a half inches high. It's just a steamer trunk.
Well, it appears that he's been dead about 2 to 3 days. Right. And comes from a long-term care situation, it seems.
How can you tell that?
Well, he's found in the pajama tops and no bottoms. They do that to make it easier to remove the bedpans and take care of him.
He appeared to be tremendously underweight. Turned out he did weigh 111 pounds and was 5'7". Very scrawny, stubble, beard, somewhat unkempt, and emaciated looking.
The coroner would soon discover large doses of a tranquilizer in the man's system, and that he died from strangulation. Who was the elderly man found in the steamer trunk? And who killed him? These key questions have mystified detectives for more than 5 years. According to experts, it is possible the man is one of thousands of elderly victims whose murders go undetected and whose killers go unpunished every year. The reason? The offenders are relatives, care providers, or even their own children.
When people get to a certain age, they are expected to die, and those deaths do not raise any eyebrows.
The senior population is the fastest growing sector in the nation. As they become infirm, they are often cared for in nursing facilities or by relatives. America's top authority on abuse of the aged believes over 3,000 elderly people are murdered every year. Perhaps this is the case with the man in the trunk.
because he was generally unkempt and appearing to be uncared for. Relief of burden homicide may be applicable here. That is, someone simply got tired of caring for the man and decided it was time for him to die. The second category that might be involved here is murder for profit, where someone has gained control of him, really doesn't care about him because obviously he was not well cared for, but was simply keeping him around for a while to make sure that they had gained absolute control of all of the assets, financial assets that could be gotten control of.
Detectives speculated as to the motive behind leaving the trunk in the open, near the trash can.
That man was put out near a trash dump, or where trash was thrown away. So it might well be that the offender in this particular case thought that he might, the man in the trunk, might simply be picked up by a trash truck and taken to a landfill.
Unlike the victim in the trunk, most murders of the elderly are disguised as a death by natural cause. Authorities aren't as likely to be aware of foul play unless an autopsy is conducted.
Is this the John Doe test results?
1% or less of elder deaths are subjected to a postmortem examination. Absent bullet holes, knife wounds, garroting, obvious signs of trauma, those cases are immediately concluded to be natural deaths. So there are very, very few postmortem examinations conducted of the elderly.
In the case of John Doe, detectives hoped an autopsy would lead not only to clues about how the victim died, but more importantly, to who he may be.
The hardest part of this investigation has been getting him identified, and we're stymied. The whole rest of the investigation is stymied because we cannot get him identified.
Identifying the victim could lead police to his killer, so the body became their key piece of evidence.
His dental records have been entered into the National Crime Information Computer. His fingerprints were taken, and we have them. The manual search by the FBI yielded negative results.
At one point, detectives were hopeful they could name the man by tracking the serial number found on a microvalve implanted in his heart during a previous surgery.
The mitral valve flexible ring came with a little 3x5 card for the physicians to fill out. The serial number was on the card. Once they used it, they were supposed to send the cards back in as a way of tracking.
Unfortunately, not all physicians returned the cards, and no match could be found. Because detectives' efforts have been stalled, they've asked us to show you the only photo available of the victim, one taken during his autopsy. Although difficult to view, it is considered by authorities to be their best hope for a positive identification. This photo was taken of the deceased in the coroner's lab. The FBI also commissioned this computer-enhanced picture of the victim. Officials hope they will spark someone's memory.
The most bothersome part of the case is that someone has, for the last 5 years, got away with this so far, and that they could do it again.
The hardest thing about this, I suppose, then, is that it's really typical of what is occurring in too many areas of the country. And that is that even our elderly have become a throwaway item in our society.
For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who holds the key. Join me for the next edition of Unsolved Mysteries.